Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Glad you can make it here. I want to try to honor you all by starting on time with our program. And so I want to kind of kick things off here. I'm just making sure everybody's logged in here. If you can give me 1 second. Looks like we got a lot of people on. And what I want to do is kind of introduce myself and talk about what we're going to do here today. First, I want to go over a schedule really quickly here. We're going to spend about 30 minutes talking about winter birds and then have about 10 minutes for questions. If you look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a few different buttons. First of all, I'll say this is a webinar, so I can't see you. Only you can see me. So if you're sitting there in your pajamas or something, that's just fine. But I hope you enjoy this. There's a chat function. You may have seen a few chat messages come up. Feel free to type in there. I will not be able to monitor those during our program. There is also a Q&A button, though, for questions and answers. If you have a question you want to ask during today's program, go ahead and type it in. I probably won't be answering it right away, but I will try to get to all of those by the end of our program. So if you do have a question, something pops up, go ahead and put it in there, and I'll try to get to that as we get to our program. All right. So first of all, I want to say who I am. My name is Kirk Mona. I'm a professional interpretive naturalist, and I have been working in the field for about 25 years now. An interpretive naturalist is somebody who usually works at someplace like a nature center and teaches about the natural world. So all about birds, like we're learning about today, is one of our big topics. And I work out at Lowry Nature Center. Lowry Nature Center is in Carver Park Reserve, just kind of west of the Twin Cities. We have about 242 different species of birds that have been seen in Carver Park. So it's a great place to come and check out birds. We're going to cover 10 of those today, not all 242. And Carver Park is about 3,600 acres. We are part of the Three Rivers Park District. And some people still haven't heard of Three Rivers. That's okay. We used to be called Hennepin Parks about 20 years ago, but we found that people, we serve more than Hennepin County. So we serve suburban Hennepin, Ramsey, Dakota, Scott counties. A lot of people coming into all of our parks. We have many different parks. We have 27,000 acres of land in the Twin Cities. That is part of our park program. Many different regional trails. We have over 7 million people a year that are visiting Three Rivers Park. So I hope you'll make it out to one of our parks or one of our trails near you sometime and try out some of your birding skills. So our big question for today, though, is what birds are here in the winter? So I'm going to go through about 10 of the most common birds that we might see. So this is kind of our beginner's class to be learning about just what's out there and specifically what might you see in the winter. This is not a comprehensive list. There are many different birds you can find in Minnesota, but these are sort of the most common ones that you might run into when you're out and about or maybe looking at the feeders in your yard. So let's jump right into it. I want to talk about this bird right here. This is the Blackcapped Chickadee, one of the most common birds we see around, but I don't want people to think of it as a really common bird and just sort of an ordinary bird. Chickadees are amazing. They are really tough. Like if this was a giant bird, we would probably be pretty terrified of them. They are pretty fierce and pretty strong. They live here in Minnesota year-round. There are actually 7 different species of chickadees found in North America. Almost all of them we're going to find here in Minnesota are going to look like this bird right here. Black on the cap, that's why it's called a black-capped chickadee. And also I want you to note that they are black through the throat as well. The bottom is, they're kind of white to the breast, but really the sides are really kind of a tannish color, and then mostly gray on the back. We do also have in Minnesota, if you go way up north, we have the boreal chickadee, and boreal chickadees are found kind of up by the Canadian border. There are some places you could go like Saxon Bog, which is a big birding location, and find the boreal chickadee as well. They have a brown head instead of the black cap on there. But even in northern Minnesota, most of the chickadees you're going to find are black-capped chickadees. Very cool bird. They can actually lower their body temperature on winter nights and sort of shiver their way through the cold. If we lower our body temperature just by a couple of degrees, we are on the way to the hospital. But chickadees can actually lower their body temperature to make it through the night, which is just amazing. Now, when you're first starting out, an easy one to confuse that with is this bird, which is the white-breasted nuthatch. And white-breasted nuthatches are similar size, a little bit bigger bird. Also, I want you to notice the general appearance of this bird. It is a longer bird. And also, look at how it's sitting on the tree. You know, it's holding on to the bark on the side of the tree. This is something chickadees cannot do. So when we're thinking about birds, it's fun to think about something called GIST, G-I-S-S-T, which stands for the general impression of size, shape, and territory, okay? If you're thinking about all those things, sort of just what's the general kind of vibe that bird is giving off, and what do you notice about its behavior? What do you notice about what kind of plants you're seeing it in, how it's sitting on the tree? Those are all clues to help you figure out what that bird is. I've seen a bird fly through the forest from hundreds of feet away and land on a tree, and I'll say, oh, it's a white-breasted nuthatch. And a new birder is going, what? You didn't even see the bird. How could you possibly have known that? But you can pick all it up just by watching these birds and seeing a general impression of how they're flying around. It flew to the tree and it landed on the trunk. Really only woodpeckers and nuthatches and maybe a bird called a brown creeper is going to do that. And so we can start to pick out little clues about what a bird is by its behavior as well. Looking at this bird though, it does have black on its head, but it's white in the throat. And that's a big distinction from the black-capped chickadee, is that it has that white throat. So if you're just starting out and you're kind of getting these two confused, look for that throat. And if it's white like that, it's not a chickadee. They also have a much bigger bill because they're going to use that bill to look down in the cracks of all that bark on the tree to try to find insects that are hiding in there. That's what they do, is they go down those trees head first, usually looking for insects that are hiding in the bark. And they are, again, here year-round. So really fun birds. You can incidentally tell the males from the females if you look very carefully. The males have a black head and the females have a very dark gray head. And I know that might sound subtle, but when you look at them at your bird feeders, you can start to tell them apart. That's true for Minnesota. That's not necessarily true across the United States. If you go east of about Ohio, they both have black heads and you can't tell them apart. So kind of a cool thing here in Minnesota. Next bird I want to talk about is one that people probably recognize right away, and this is the northern cardinal. Cardinals tend to group up in the wintertime. They do stick around all winter. So sometimes people will say, oh, you know, I don't see any cardinals. Did they migrate away? And meanwhile, your neighbor 4 houses down is saying, I've got, you know, 25 cardinals in my yard. It all depends. You know, if you've got the good bird seed, they're going to come to your yard. And they do definitely form these big family groups and these flocks in the winter. And so you'll see lots of cardinals hanging out. Now, this is the male cardinal, which is the bright red, and the female is a darker brown. In chickadees, that's a great one to contrast this with. These birds are showing something called sexual dimorphism, which is like, woof, big words. Di meaning two, morph meaning appearance. So two appearances. Basically, the boys and girls look different than each other. In chickadees, that's not true. You can never tell the males and females apart just by looking at them out in the field based on their plumage, but you can with the cardinals. So cardinals are a really fun, great bird to recognize. It's going to be around your yard all the time. Incidentally, if you have some feeders up and you're saying, you know, cardinals aren't coming to my tube feeders, they're a bigger bird. And so they need to have a bigger perch to sit on. So you might want something like a platform feeder or a fly-through feeder that has a bigger spot for them to sit. And that'll get you a better chance of getting cardinals to show up in your yard. All right, next bird. Okay. People are kind of going, wait a minute, a crow? Like, you know, yeah, crows. Crows are fascinating. We tend to think of little songbirds as being these little things. Crows are technically in the songbird family. They're a passerine. And crows are amazing, amazing creatures. Very intelligent. Some of the most intelligent birds around. I guess because they're not really showy colors. We maybe don't give them all the credit we should. But they are really fantastic. And there's been lots of studies where crows can actually recognize human faces, which is fascinating. And we've also been seeing a phenomenon here in the Twin Cities that if you want to check out one of the most amazing spectacles around that has to do with birds, it has to do with crows. And that is the Minneapolis crow roost. This started off probably 20 to 30 years ago. We started to notice increased numbers of crows coming into the city at night. And now crows have always done something interesting in the winter where they do kind of like I mentioned with cardinals. They have a winter flock that kind of hangs out. And this is the time when there's not a lot of competition for territory. So birds are more likely to be social with each other. And they will also just kind of hang out in these big winter groups. It's a chance literally to meet each other, maybe find a potential mate or something like that, but it's a chance to kind of socialize, and there's safety in numbers. Well, crows are, remember, very smart, and they figured out something really interesting. They could come to a place like Carver Park in the winter and hang out in groups, which they do, but they could also go downtown Minneapolis, and they literally go downtown Minneapolis for the same reasons a lot of us might go down there. There's a bunch of lights and excitement going on and great food, and that's literally why they go down there. It's well lit at night, and one of the most problems for them is predators. Great horned owls will eat them. If they're hanging out with lots of other crows in a well lit area, that's really safe for them, so they like that. There's lots of food scraps around in Minneapolis because there's a lot of people leaving bits of food scraps out. So there you go, a food source. It's also warmer in the city at night because of the urban heat island effect. It's also, you're not allowed to hunt crows, and there is crow hunting outside of cities. And so you're not allowed to hunt crows in the cities, and so it's safer there and they're not being shot at. So you have crows that over the last 30 years have started to figure out, oh, hey, you know what? Going to the city and spending the night in the city is a really great thing. So crows from Carver Park will fly all the way into the Twin Cities, into Minneapolis. They might fly, from 20 miles around to come into the city, and they come by the tens of thousands of crows. You can go to places like Loring Park, kind of that western side of downtown, just as the sun goes down, and there are rivers of crows flying in. 100 birds, 200, 300, 1,000 birds coming in at a time and flying around. And it is one of the most spectacular things you'll see. We're kind of on the tail end of that now, where they're starting to kind of spend more time away from the city, but in the wintertime, it's one of the most amazing things. And if you live in Minnesota and you're into birds, you got to go check it out at some point. All right, next, the Downy woodpecker. Probably the most common woodpecker you might find at your home, and they are small. They're only about this big, really cute woodpeckers that'll come to your feeders. They're often confused with the next bird, and that is the hairy woodpecker. And so I want you to look at something on this bird. First of all, this is a female. The males would have a small red spot on the back of their head, but we're not going to look at that. I want you to look at the beak. Look at the size of that beak. Now, if you pull out, probably got, oh, here we go, off my bookshelf here, you've got a field guide of some kind, and you look in here, it's going to mention that you should look at this bird's tail to look for these little spots on the tail to tell it apart from its bigger cousin, the hairy woodpecker. Give me a break. Don't do that. Can you see this bird's tail right now? No, you can't. And most of the time when you're in the field, you can't see these spots on the tail either. Ignore that. Just look at the bird's beak. That is a little teeny tiny beak compared to the size of the bird's head. It maybe goes back about as far as its eye, okay? Check out this next bird here. Look at the hairy woodpecker. Now, the first thing you're gonna notice is that big, huge beak. The pattern is the same: black head, white eye stripe, black, what's called the auricular patch. It's kind of what covers its ear, and then a white stripe, and then a little black mustache kind of line there. That is the same as we saw on the face for the Downy woodpecker, but look at that beak. The beak is almost as big as its entire head, right? So when you're out in the field, now this is a bigger woodpecker, they're about this big, but when it's on a tree far away, you may not be able to tell them apart, except for the beak. Look at that beak, it's huge. So a great way to tell the Downy and the hairy woodpecker apart is just looking at the beak, all right? And hairies will show up in your yard or the parks near you as well, but they're not gonna be as high of a number. So you'll never see as many hairies around as you would Downies. All right, so speaking of woodpeckers here, we've got the red-bellied woodpecker, and right away, some people are going, hold on. Why is this called a red-bellied woodpecker? Look at that red head. Why isn't this the red-headed woodpecker? We do have red-headed woodpeckers here in Minnesota, but the red is gonna go like from right here all the way up and all the way back. It's like a red hood over there. And it's also a red that makes this orangish red look shabby. It is a gorgeous sort of deep red. And the back of their feathers too is almost all black with a few kind of bold white markings. So red-headed woodpeckers are gorgeous and amazing and found in Minnesota, but a red belly is far, far more common. But why called red belly? Well, a lot of birds were named after people like scientists who many, many years ago were out and put it this way, they were shooting them. Okay, before we had binoculars to see a bird in the field, which is a fairly recent phenomenon to have good binoculars. The way ornithologists would identify birds would be to see something fly by and they would shoot it and then go pick it up, and they could study it in detail, which is kind of morbid, but that's how it was done. And if you have this bird in your hand, one of the things you'll notice is that its belly, which is going to be way down, I did a point, you can't see it, way down between, like literally between its legs, it is red like the color of its head. It's kind of a reddish wash on there. That is very hard to see. The bird is going to keep that hidden by keeping up against close to the tree, but that's where they get their name. So red-bellied woodpecker. They are increasing in numbers. We're seeing more and more and more of these of Minnesota. They are doing very well. They are a species that is doing really well and is okay with being around people. So we'll see these. They are very loud. They make a lot of noise. So if you have them near you in the springtime, you'll be able to hear their call. I don't have it for you to hear right now, but if you look it up online, you'll hear that call and you may say, oh, I've heard that, you know, by my house or by my school or something like that. So you definitely want to keep your eyes and ears open for this bird. Sadly, because they're doing so well, in some cases they are pushing the red-headed woodpecker out of their territory and making it harder for those birds as well. And their numbers are not doing as well in Minnesota. But red-bellied woodpeckers, great, really fun bird to watch here in Minnesota. Okay, the American goldfinch. So the goldfinch is one of these birds that a lot of people love. Some people call them like yellow finches and stuff. There's other kinds of finches, but the ones we have here are the American goldfinch. And one of the questions I get a lot as a professional naturalist when we talk about birds is someone says, oh, I love the goldfinches. They come to my yard. I just wish they stuck around all year. Well, they do stick around all year. This bird is here all winter long, and that throws a lot of new birders off because this is, again, a sexually dimorphic bird. The males and females look different. This is the male. They have the black spot up on the top of the head and very bright yellow. This is what the female looks like. Much more sort of brownish. The wings aren't really black where they would be black. They're dark brown instead. Instead of having a crisp white bar across the wing, it's sort of a washed kind of tannish color. However, in the winter time, the males lose their bright colored feathers and molt into feathers that look like this. So in the winter time, the males and females look the same. And if you have bird feeders up, you may have American goldfinches at your bird feeders all winter long while you're staring at them going, oh, I wish we had those colorful goldfinches. Well, you do. It's not colorful. They're a fun one to watch in the winter, though, because they will start. Actually, the goldfinches I have at my bird feeders here at home actually have already started to get a few yellow feathers. So you can pick out the males by going, ooh, that one, look, it's got one little tiny black feather coming in on the head, or it's got, a couple little yellow feathers coming in. And literally week to week, you can watch those colors change and you can watch them come into those colors. Now, why not just be bright all year? Males are show-offs. Some of you already know that. The males are showing off usually for the females, but not always. There are some species where the males are actually showing off to try to intimidate other males of that species. That's true for red-winged blackbirds. But in this case, the males are bright colors to impress the females. The problem with that is if you're bright colored, you're also going to attract predators to you. Now that could prove useful. If you're both sitting by a nest and a predator comes in, the male can say, hey, look at me, and fly away. And the predator will follow the bright colored male away from the nest and protect the eggs from being eaten. So it's really valuable at sometimes to be brightly colored. But in the winter, it's not mating season. The males don't have to be bright colored to impress the females. They don't have to be bright colored to lure away the predators. They don't want to attract the attention and become lunch themselves. So a lot of species will have a molt of their feathers where they lose those bright colors and go into a winter molt that is going to look more bland and not get them eaten, which is probably a pretty good thing. Up next, we have this little bird, and this is a really cool bird. It looks kind of bland, whitish underneath, gray on top. This is the slate-colored Junko. Also, you might see it called the dark-eyed Junko. Juncos are confusing. They have lots of different names that have changed over time. But this is the slate-colored Junko. And this is a great example of a bird that migrates south in the winter. All the birds we've seen so far have been birds that stick around. You know, they don't migrate a whole lot. Although we have found out a little bit that goldfinches actually do migrate a little bit. But Juncos head south for the winter, and they go to an amazing southern location that some of you might have heard of called Minnesota. Now you might be going, whoa, hold on. You said they migrate south for the winter. They do. They migrate to Minnesota. They come here, which gives you an idea of how far north these birds must live in the summertime. They live up in Canada and they start migrating south. I think when people are starting off birding, they have this thought that, oh, birds migrate because it gets too cold. And that's not true. Birds don't migrate because it's cold. They migrate because they can't find food. If you're an insect eater and it's too cold for your food, for the insects to be alive, you need to migrate south. If you're a seed eater in Minnesota, you can find seeds all winter long. You don't need to migrate down south. It's not too cold for the birds, it's too cold for their food. Now, Juncos, they eat food off the ground. They're ground feeders, or like if you have grass growing up, not the grass in your yard, but longer grass like prairie grasses that have seeds that come up, they're going to eat those seeds that are sticking up above the snow. We don't get that much snow here in Minnesota. Maybe there's like a foot of snow. Come on out to the prairie at Lowry or some other places, you'll find that the grass grows 6 feet tall or more. I'm 6 feet tall. Sometimes the grass is up here in the summertime when we're walking out there in the prairie. So that is always above the snow. We never get like 7 feet of snow in Minnesota. So when these birds migrate south, they get to Minnesota and they look around and go, yeah, this works. This looks like a great place to find food. And so Juncos are sometimes called the snowbirds. They show up just before it snows, and then they'll leave sometime after the snow melts and go back up north. So we do have birds that migrate here in the winter, and it's a winter bird in Minnesota, but it's one of the ones that you're not going to find here in the summer. Now, blue jays. Kind of like, if we were in person, I'd say, raise your hand if you've seen a blue jay in the summer. Okay, raise your hand if you've seen a blue jay in the winter, and everybody's hands would probably be up. You know, we see these summer and winter, but here's something really cool we've learned is that the blue jays we have in the summer and the blue jays we have in the winter are not the same birds. Our summer blue jays fly south when it's time to migrate, and the birds from up in Canada, northern Minnesota, they come down to sort of the Twin Cities region, and they look around and go, yeah, this is good. We'll stay here. And so the birds, if you have blue jays in your yard, those probably are not the ones that you're going to have around your house in the summer, even though they look the same. I'm a licensed bird bander, so we catch birds and put little bands on them. You can come out to Lowry Nature Center. We are resuming very limited public banding starting in March. And you can watch us doing this research where we catch these birds and put these bands on them. And part of that process is we weigh them. And one of the things we find is that blue jays we catch in the winter always weigh more, and their legs are actually physically bigger than the ones we catch in the summer, because birds from up north are actually a little bit bigger and bulkier than ones that are born down here in the south. So really cool genetics going on there. Blue jays don't get enough credit. If you'd never seen this bird before, and someone took pictures of us, they had been down to like Panama on a birding trip and came back and said, you've got to see this bird, it's amazing, and showed you this, you would lose your mind, right? You'd be like, I've got to go to that country and go see these birds. Oh, I would love to go to the rainforest and see birds. Look at this thing. Look at the colors on there. They are amazing. And this is something that shows up in our yards, like at our bird feeders. So we are so lucky to have blue jays. And there's also something special about blue jays that is different than every other bird I've shown you. The yellow birds, the red birds, when you see those birds, their feathers have pigments in them. So if I took, let's take the cardinal, for example. I took that bright red cardinal feather and I put it into like a grinder that could grind it into a very fine powder. And I was to pour that powder out, the powder would be red. It's not surprising. There's red pigment in those feathers. However, if I took these really bright blue jay feathers and took them out and ground them into a powder and looked at that powder, it would not be blue. It would be a very light gray color, which is sort of mysterious. It's because this blue is not made by pigment. It's actually made by the shape of the microstructures of the feathers that creates a blue iridescence that is reflected by the surface of that feather having a very specific shape and geometry that reflects blue light and does not reflect the other light. So wow, so cool that bird feathers can be colored from pigments or from their actual physical structure. And that's why some birds actually change color as the angle and the angle of sunlight hitting them actually changes. The actual color of the bird will change, which is really super fascinating. So that's it. I know it goes by really fast, you guys. Those are the 10 most common birds that we have here in Minnesota. And what I would like to know is what questions people have about those birds or about birds here in Minnesota. If you have any questions, I need to minimize my thing here so I can see your questions. I do have some questions that came up. Okay, so we're gonna back up a little bit. So first question we had, Terrence wants to know, can I repeat what GISST stands for again? Absolutely. So general impression of size, shape, and territory. I added the T on there. Other people don't use that, but I think it makes it the word gist, which is fun. So if you also know what the territory is of where you expect to find birds, you see a bird that looks like a sedge wren hanging out in sedges, it's a good chance it's a sedge wren. So great question there. And Terrence also says that your son has seen the crows in Prospect Park. So that's awesome. Yeah, the crow roost is really cool. Someone wants to know, do we have snowy owls in Minnesota? And can I tell you about them? We do have snowy owls in Minnesota. If you're a Harry Potter fan, and you're like Hedwig, we do have snowy owls. Now they're not here in the summer. They do come down in the winter. We used to think it was because they were starving. They could not get adequate food up in Canada and they come down. There's been new research that has shown that is not correct at all. The ones they have caught that have come down here have actually been very well fed. It's just that they're the young owls who are dispersing out of their territory. It's kind of what it seems like. And they do go back up into Canada at the end. Weirdly, the best place to try to see them is at the MSP airport. Just be careful. They kind of sometimes frown upon people standing around with binoculars looking into the airport. But there's not Post Road. I think what road? Cargo Road, which is where the FedEx facility is. There is a place where you can go and park, and basically you drive under a tunnel and you come out in the middle of the runway and stuff, and you're like, I'm not supposed to be here, but it's a big fenced off area where FedEx's facility is. And if you know where to look, you can actually see snowy owls there. Does help to have something like a spotting scope though, rather than binoculars, because they can be quite far away. And there's a lot of strict rules about where you can and can't be. So you need to do a little research online about where to go to see those as well. But they are in Minnesota, and a very cool species to see. Dina wants to know, are downy woodpeckers territorial? I have the same pair showing up to my tree feeder every day. Wonder if they have a nest but don't see anything. Do they nest in holes? Bunch of questions there. Yes, they're territorial, absolutely. But that doesn't mean you're only gonna see like those two at your feeders. There's actually some research that was done on downy woodpeckers by a bird bander who was catching every bird that came to their yard and said, I wanna find out how many, when you see two, how many are really there? And she counted, I think, over 60 that were coming into just one bird feeder. So there's probably, if you're only seeing two, there may actually be more than two that are visiting your feeders. They probably have a nest nearby somewhere, but it may not be in your yard, because they can come from a good distance. If you have good food out, it's like you might drive a distance to try to get, your favorite restaurant. Maybe you have really good food out and you're attracting them from a couple blocks around. So it may be in someone else's yard, and they do nest in holes. They use that beak of theirs to make cavities or holes in the trees, and that those actually become really important nest sites for other species, which is really cool. Let's see what else we have. Can you give us some more examples of ways to identify birds by their flight patterns? Oh yeah. So there was a question. This was Jose asked about nuthatches landing on the bark. Actually, mentioned one that I was going to mention as well there, which is finches flying an up and down cadence. So they kind of do this like kind of this wavy flight as they go in. And that's a great one. And they also kind of do what I'll call the potato chip, potato chip, potato chip as they're flying. That's a really great one for the goldfinches. Trying to think of some other ones. You know, it's hard to give examples from the ones that I saw. Some of it's just spending a lot of time in the field, and you just come to sort of, it's something you feel where you're like, oh, I've seen birds fly like that before, and it kind of makes that general impression on you. There are some things, a great one though, which I didn't mention here, is the difference between vultures and eagles. And we do have, the vultures will be back soon. The eagles are already here. They only migrate as far as Wabasha, so they don't go real far. We've seen eagles flying around. They've actually are on their nest actually, so they're back in territories now. One of the things you can see is them, when people are starting off, there's this big, huge bird in the sky, and they're not sure if it's a vulture or an eagle. One of the great ways to tell is that vultures have a rocking flight, where they sort of like kind of wobble back and forth, and they hold their wings in a V shape, and there's what's called a dihedral, and they kind of are wobbling back and forth, whereas eagles are just flat-winged and steady the whole time. So that's another example of telling some birds apart by their flight pattern. But we could do a whole class on that. There's hundreds of those. All right. Let's see what else we have. Some people just saying thank you and stuff. You're welcome. What's the best seed to offer in the winter? That's a great question. You know, this was part of a longer program that I did early, like about a month ago. That was an hour-long program, and I decided to break it in half for this one because there were some people who couldn't attend that one. So I did a whole program on how to attract birds to your yard with bird feeders. If people want that, let us know on Facebook and say, yeah, please do that. And maybe I'll do that one again as a separate half-hour program. The short answer, black oil sunflower seeds. If you're only going to feed one thing, put out black oil sunflower seeds. That's going to attract the most stuff. I generally don't recommend if you're only going to have one thing, I don't recommend the mixes of seeds, because what happens is other birds, when they try to get to the one they want, they just kick all the other seeds out of the way to get to the one they want, and they all fall on the ground and attract mice, and then you're wasting seeds, because everyone's usually kicking out all that junk seed to get to the black oil sunflower seeds. Just fill the whole tube with black oil sunflower seeds. Where would you recommend going to see a chance of red-headed woodpecker? Oh boy, there's lots of places. One good place to go if you want to go to like a state park, I know Nerstrand Big Woods is a beautiful park to go and visit, and that's south of south of the Twin Cities, and you can go check them out. But they're in lots of places. If you aren't familiar with the website eBird.org, you can actually go onto eBird and click on Explore and type in a species, and it will show you essentially live where everyone has been seeing species. And you might look at it and go, oh my gosh, there's a park down the street from my house that has red-headed woodpeckers. So I know you can go to Nerstrand and see them, but there may be something even closer if you check on eBird. And I don't know where you are, so I can't answer that specifically. But there definitely are places. And I don't know exactly how low the population is becoming, but it's definitely a bird you can go out and see. They're not that rare at this point. Where is the origin of the name? What is the origin of the name Nuthatch? That's a great question, you guys. I don't know for certain, so I don't want to say for certain, but I would guess it's probably has to do with their habit of like trying to hatch open or a nut. They are seed eaters, and they'll try to open it up. That's probably what I'm guessing. Incidentally, if you ever want to know where a word is from, there's a great website called Etymology Online, and you can type in any word and it'll tell you the origin. So go type in nuthatch and it might tell you. Can you show a picture of the owl? I unfortunately don't have a picture of the owl on there. I assume you're talking about the snowy owl. I don't have one on this presentation, so I can't bring one up. If you search for snowy owl, you can find one online. Also, if you want to learn more about snowy owls, I didn't mention this, you can go to a website called Project Snowstorm. That is the project where they are catching snowy owls that come south of the border, putting radio transmitters on their back, and then tracking where they go when they go back up to Canada and around the United States. Fascinating research, very cool. So Project Snowstorm is what that's called. You can do a Google search for that. Where were the birds when it was sub-zero weathers these last couple of weeks? They were outside being very cold is where they were. You know, you're not going to see them as active. They should be coming to bird feeders, try to fill up, but they're also going to come to the very best bird feeders and get the best seed they can find. And but they're not going to spend a lot of time, you know, being out and about, being super active because they're trying to conserve their energy. Very cold weather, they're going to go into cavities inside trees to try to stay warm and out of the wind. Even ones that aren't cavity nesters may even then go inside some trees and things like that to try to stay warm. Do your 10 birds nest in trees all winter? You know, the idea of a nest is really misleading. I think we think of nests as where birds live, and nests are not where birds live. Nests are a cupped structure that is to keep eggs from falling out of a tree. That's all a nest is. A nest is a structure to stop eggs from rolling away. Some birds nest on the ground, some nest in a cavity, some nest on a tree branch. The nest is going to look different depending on where they are. But a lot of birds at night, they just go and sit on a branch and kind of hunker down, and that's it. They're not in any nest at all. So some of these that are cavity nesters probably will go inside a cavity, and it may be their nest cavity, and that's a great place to go at night. But a lot of them are not necessarily going to be sleeping in a nest at all in the winter. They're just going to find maybe a little bit of a sheltered spot on a branch and hunker down, and that's where they stay. Great question. Let's see. Elizabeth wanted to know, what can we do to create good backyard environments for winter birds? Oh my gosh, Elizabeth. Again, I could do an hour program on that one. So let me just quickly say, you know, providing bird seed for them. If you want to have a heated water bath, you can do that as well. But keeping some wild spaces in your yard, keeping some brush piles, making brush piles, having bushes they can hide in so they don't get eaten by predators, leaving a lot of your flowers up in your garden. If you have a garden, don't deadhead the flowers before winter. Those are full of seeds. That's food for birds. You know, free bird food. People will cut all the heads off their flowers, all the seeds, throw them away, and then go to the store and buy seeds. You're throwing money away. Leave those all on there. Great question. And yep, Roseanne said she saw a eagle sitting on a branch in Whitebreasted Township. Yeah, they definitely are back. Eagles start to nest right around Valentine's Day is when they're mating. So they have eggs in the nest right now. They are around. Oh, great question here from Elaine. She wants to know, are there ravens around the Twin Cities, and how are they different than crows? I didn't mention this in my presentation. There are some ravens in the Twin Cities area, very rare. Even in northern Minnesota, when you see a big black bird, I feel like most of them are crows, but there are ravens in northern Minnesota. They do come down to the Twin Cities. I believe Sherburne area has some ravens. I used to work at a nature center that was in northern Washington County along the St. Croix River, and we had a pair of nesting ravens, probably some of the furthest south nesting ravens. But if even in like Stillwater, down by the river in Stillwater, I've seen a raven once in a while. The biggest thing you're going to see is they're going to be bigger, which size is so hard to tell. If you see them up close, they have a bigger bill. If they make a noise, it's really easy to make a very different. They don't do a caw, they do like a quack, quack, like a big, deep, low noise. And their tail is more wedge shaped. Tail shape it's a terrible way to identify birds, but it's true. They have a much more bigger sort of fan wedge shaped tail than a crow. But if you are lucky, you can spot one. If you think you have one in your backyard around the Twin Cities, it's probably just a big crow, though. All right. And so Jean is saying she thinks woodpeckers have a recognizable way of flying. Look, every species of bird has a slightly different way of flying, and you're right. The more you look at them, the more you study them. Even the common birds, you know, when you're starting out, the more those become sort of familiar friends of yours. Once you're out in you know, looking around and you get more into birding, looking for a little bit, you know, trying to expand out to some of those hundreds and hundreds of kinds of birds we have. The more familiar you are with the familiar birds, the more you can sort of go, oh, I know what that is because I've seen that so many times. So looking at those those common birds is really good. Prudence wants to know, does Minnesota have falcons? Yes, we have 5 different kinds of falcons. Boy, let me see. We have prairie falcons, way out west, but not real common, but you could find one. Here around the Twin Cities, what you're going to see most commonly are American kestrels, which is our smallest falcon. They are about this big. They're not real big, they're real cute. We have peregrine falcons that are nesting mostly in our downtown areas on nesting platforms. We did a big reintroduction of peregrine falcons into the Twin Cities and tried to first reintroduce them to nests on cliffs where they historically would have nested. And there was a lot of predation from raccoons and other animals in their nests. And so on a whim, they decided to put boxes up on skyscrapers, and the falcons have taken to it amazing. They're like, oh, hey, raccoons can't get up here, except for maybe that one raccoon that was climbing that skyscraper a couple of years ago in St. Paul and was on the news. But in general, there's no predators for them up there. Then we have gyr falcons. It's kind of the other one I can think of that you would probably see if you were like northern Minnesota. So definitely do have falcons around here in Minnesota. Great question. Is there anything you can use in homemade suet other than lard? Yeah, any kind of fat, really. If you have a slice of meat, I just had something that like had a big ribbon of fat on it, and I sliced that off and threw it straight in my suet feeder. It's actually, I think, not as like melty as lard, so actually might be kind of better. Any kind of fat. There have been some people saying maybe don't do like bacon fat that's full of all kinds of nitrates and salts and stuff like that. It can be kind of dehydrating, but any sort of natural fat is a natural part of birds' diets. They are literally finding dead animals, like chickadees will find, and woodpeckers, and they will peck all the fat off the animal because it's basically pure energy. So it's an important way for them to survive. Oh, great. Someone Elaine said she sees redheaded woodpeckers at Wood Lake Nature Center in Richfield. I didn't know that they were seen there. That's great, Elaine. So that's going to be a lot closer spot for people to go see them for most of us. And they're going to start doing more programming probably here with COVID as it gets better and better. And there's some great naturalists out there who can maybe help you find those if you ask them where. Generally, the clue on that one is going to be red-headed woodpeckers. They need very large, mature trees like oak trees. So you're going to want to look for the biggest trees at the park, and that's probably your best chance of seeing them. Do I have any seminars geared toward kids coming up? Kristen wants to know. Thank you for asking, Kristen. Not specifically. I've got something better for you. We are relaunching this year what used to be called the Minnesota Young Birders Club. It's being rebranded as the Three Rivers Young Birders Club because we're trying to tie it into all the Three Rivers parks and nature centers. And it's going to be, your son is almost old enough. That's for ages 9 to 12. And we're going to be doing kickoff events at 4 locations next month in March. There'll be outdoor stuff, socially distanced. So if you feel like you can do that safely, you can come. There is going to be one at Lowry Nature Center, East Bend Nature Center, Highland Nature Center, and Mississippi Gateway, which is one of our newer named parks. It used to be called Coon Rapids Dam Park, which is part of Three Rivers as well. We're going to be doing programs at all those, and there's going to be monthly programs going on all year long for youth ages 9 to 12 who are into birds. If you have a teenager, or if you are a teenager who's into birds, we also are starting our teen team, which is a group of volunteers that helps mentor those younger birders in programs. And then once you put in your volunteer hours, there's going to be special exclusive teen only birding opportunities. They'll be really fun to like meet other teenagers who are into your geeky hobby and get out there. And we're going to be doing things like owl banding at night, doing big day competitions where we're driving around looking for like rare birds and stuff. So that's all kind of post-COVID stuff, but that's coming up. So if you have a young birder, I would recommend going on Facebook and searching for Three Rivers Young Birders Club, and it should pop up, and just click on it and ask to join, and you'll get information about our new programs coming up. And I'm one of the leaders for those programs when they go on out at Lowry Nature Center. So hopefully, Kristen, we can get your son into those at some point, and we're doing some summer camps and stuff too. Some people saying thank you, you're welcome, glad you loved all this, you guys. Someone said, Julie said, you mentioned chickadees are tough birds. Could you say a bit more about their character or toughness and what examples they might be? For such a small bird, they're really pretty feisty. I can tell you that they're very strong for their size. And I think of them as being tough. They have that little tiny beak, and I have to hold them in my hand when I'm doing bird banding, and they're sitting there chewing on my hand, and it hurts a lot. So I can tell you that they're very like feisty, tough birds, and really are pretty amazing. But I think the toughness, what I think of with that is their ability to withstand the cold. That I mentioned earlier, how they can literally lower their body temperature and go into what's called torpor, where they are, on the verge of hypothermia. That would kill a lot of animals. And here's a little bird, a chickadee, that only weighs as much as 10 paper clips, 10 of the large paper clips. They weigh 10 grams. That's how much a chickadee weighs. And for a bird this small to be so resilient is just really, really amazing. So Jean wants to know, we've been hearing more about evening grosbeaks here this winter. Why? Grosbeaks are what's called an eruptive species. They are usually further north, up in Canada, for example, and they feed on cone crops, on conifers. So conifers, they have what's called a mast years. Oak trees do this too, where they produce a lot of seeds in certain years to try to produce more than the animals could possibly eat. So some of them actually hit the ground and germinate. But then there are certain years where they don't produce very much. And so when you have a bunch of really abundant years, the population kind of goes up of these bird species. And they're like, yeah, we have all this food. And all of a sudden the trees stop producing those cone crops. And the birds have no choice but to migrate south looking for birds. So this has been a year where we've seen a lot of winter finches. We've seen a lot of crossbills. And we've seen a lot of the evening grosbeaks probably coming further south looking for food. So that happens every once in a while. All right, looks like we have any more questions? We have one last question. Patricia had a question about robins. Do they re-nest in the same nest they built during their first mating season? No, they're going to build a fresh nest when they're out there. So they are not a species that reuses a nest. There's not that most species build a new nest a lot of years. Great examples like a bald eagle. They just keep adding on, and they can get something like 12 feet across. I mean, they can get enormous. So they are a species that reuses it, but robins, they're going to build a fresh one. Some of that may even have to do with, it'd be good to look at some of the literature on this, because this is me purely guessing. One of the big problems in nests is you have parasites. They'll start to get into those nests. And so by making a fresh nest, you're ensuring that it's all fresh material, and you're not going to have some of those feather mites and things that are in there kind of chewing on your babies. So having a fresh nest is probably a good idea for a lot of species. So everybody, thank you so much for coming in for the presentation. You're welcome. I hope that you enjoy this. Some of you are saying you missed the first part. Assuming the recording of this worked well, I know our last recording got corrupted, but if this recording works well, we'll be posting this on Facebook probably on Monday or so. So you'll be able to go back and watch the whole thing or share it with your friends. That'll be on the Lowry Nature Center Facebook page. So you can check out Lowry Nature Center while you're there. And thanks so much for stopping in on this Saturday. Thank you to everyone who stopped by. I know we tried to do this last Saturday and had a catastrophic computer failure just before we were supposed to start. And I'm on a brand new computer now. So thank you for everybody for coming back a week later. I hope you had a great time. Everybody enjoy the rest of your weekend and get out there and see some birds. All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.